Serious, survivors of plane crashes, boat sinks or something catastrophic of this magnitude. What's your story? When I was 9, we were traveling from our cabin back to town with an open boat. This was right before Easter, about a 45 minutes trip. The seas were rough and the boat had a built-in flaw that caused it to break in 2 pieces due to the pounding on the waves. I sat face towards the back, so I didn't see it break. Just suddenly had water up to my waist. When I turned around, the nose was floating a couple of meters away from the boat. My mom's husband at the time just said jump, and so we did, into the black 2D water of the North Sea, as far away from the boat as possible. This was by far the scariest moment. Her husband managed to launch 2 emergency rockets before the boat vanished below him. He was a very poor swimmer, and even though we tried to hold on to him, he got away from us due to large waves constantly covering us. After that, it was about 10 minutes of trying to swim to shore, which was about 400 meters away, before realizing we were never going to make it. After that, we basically dodged waves and made bad taste jokes. We saw people on the shore. Cars stopped on the highway. The last thing I remember before blacking out is a boat approaching. Then I woke up in the hospital, basically trashing around from the cramps of my body trying to warm up. Apparently I had a temp of 27 degrees when they brought me in. My mom was awake the whole time. She lost control of her limbs right after I blacked out and gripped a rope from my life vest with her teeth so I wouldn't float away. Even though this is a scary story, there are some awesome elements to it. An old fisherman in a house by the shore saw the whole thing. He was desperately trying to get a hold of rescue services, but no one was where they were supposed to be. His wife, having lost both her previous husband and also a son, he had some kind of a health issue while watching us swim around. So he had to take care of her and try to get us help. The most badass part of the story is how we got rescued. One of my mom's husband's friends got a call about what was happening, got in his boat with his 8-month pregnant wife, and went full speed to our location. The boat he had was not designed for high seas. It was a summer type cabin cruiser, so he had to steer it towards the waves at all times. His wife then proceeded to pull 3 fully clothed people up to safety, including an unconscious me. If anyone has ever tried to pull someone out of the water, you know how difficult it is. We all survived. I was totally fine, aside from my balls swelling up to 3 times the normal size for a couple of days. Mom tore a bunch of stuff in her back. Husband swallowed about 4 liters of salt water and was sick for a week. TLDR. Boat broke I2. Cold water. Amazing rescue. Those moms are badasses. Frick, I'm late to the party. I was pilot in command of a small Cessna, taking my dad out for his first sightseeing ride on an October evening. He'd taken the backseat in one of my training sessions before, but this time was the first time the 2 of us were alone together and at liberty to go as we pleased. After a while, I noticed that the engine had lost 300 revolutions per minute. I pushed the throttle to maximum. No change. Turned on the carb heat. If I remember correctly, nope. Still nothing. I began heading back to the airport, but as the power slowly diminished, I knew we wouldn't make it back by a long shot. Conclusion. I had to get that bird down somewhere. It was nighttime. Beneath me were patches of fields or forest, and I couldn't tell which was which in the evening darkness. I opted for the only well-lit place in the circumstances, the freeway. I made my emergency call, got a response, told my dad what I was about to do, and proceeded to fly the airplane. By the time I was on my so-called final approach, the engine was puttering along at a measly 1000 revolutions per minute despite a full open throttle. All I had to do was to follow a slight bend in the freeway to the left, just past a viaduct, and I'd have 3 open lanes of road on which to land and probably surprise a few drivers along the way. Huge black bars suddenly showed up in my field of vision, followed by bright white flashes of light. The aircraft had just struck high voltage power lines. By the time I was done screaming, the aircraft had rolled down in a side ditch and slammed itself against a fence. Ambulances arrived within a minute, pulled my dad and I out, and raced us to the hospital. I awoke in a dimly lit hospital room. Dimly lit because of the citywide power failure I just caused, which I realized once all the other lights turned on late at night and the nurses cheered at getting power back. Somehow, I didn't break anything, though I had a sore and stiff body for a few weeks. and my back became prone to locking for the next several years. My father had a few broken bones, but was judged stable and set to recover. However, he suddenly and unexpectedly succumbed to his wounds a week later. I haven't piloted an aircraft since, and have no desire to. I can be a passenger in an airliner or a commercial small aircraft without a problem, but my days of flying are over. From what you described, it sounds like you noticed your engine trouble early. Too often pilots don't know anything is wrong until the stall horn is going off in the middle of a turn. With this in mind, if you decide to get current again, I would fly with you. I was stuck in a bushfire here in Australia. Myself and our infant son were in the car evacuating on the only road out of our small town. We got very little warning as the fire moved so fast. Fire was coming on the right side of the road. Smoke everywhere, could hardly see. So was driving and luckily saw the truck in front of us and stopped in time before hitting it. A semi-trailer truck, 18-wheeler, had jackknifed in the road and was blocking the way. We couldn't see if anyone was in the truck and I was going to go out and check, but the fire was now at the roadside on our right and years of fire safety education had taught me you stay in the car. We had a UHF radio in the car, so tried to contact the truck on that with no response. The fire started to blow across the road and ignite the bush on our left. There were embers raining down on our car. We just stared at them bouncing off the car bonnet. I saw a flashing red glow in the smoke beyond the truck and it took a minute or so to work out what I was seeing. It was a fire service truck. I had to fight every bit of instinct I had in me, which was screaming at me to grab my baby, hide him inside my clothes and run towards the red lights. I doubt I'd have made it. Fire was literally blowing around in front of us, but dang if that wasn't the strongest instinct I've ever felt. I just sat there in the car repeating over and over to myself, stay in the car, stay in the car. So managed to contact the fireys on the UHF to alert them to our presence. They sprayed water over us while a secondary truck drove through the burning scrub around the big truck to reach us, and then the rest all was a blur. Being transferred to their truck and driving out of there, watching the bushfire raging behind us. Saw the news in hospital where they reported 2 deceased people found in that semi-trailer truck. Volunteer firefighters saved our lives. I would have hated to be with one of my kids. Glad you made it. Here's a question I can honestly answer. I survived an airplane crash. The story: my mother owned a few aircrafts and hangar at our small town's airport. I spent a lot of time at the airport as I was growing up, spending summer washing airplanes, sweeping out hangars, etc. One warm summer afternoon in the mid-1980s, we planned to take a short flight in her Piper J3 Cub. This plane was built in the mid-1940s and had an aluminum skeleton covered in fabric and tandem seats, one in front, one in back. I sat in front due to the better view and my mom, the pilot, sat in back. I remember the pre-flight and some taxiing to the runway, but nothing else. Now the rest of the story I received secondhand. Neither my mom nor I remember anything of the actual accident due to the massive head trauma we both received. But what I've heard from family and the ambulance drivers who arrived on the scene is that on takeoff, the most dangerous part of any flight, we lost power. Engine cut out, not really sure why. So with a relatively slow airspeed and no thrust from the engine, we changed from being a beautiful flying machine to a brick rather quickly. Well, we dropped like a brick and proceeded to hit the ground in a rather quick manner. The ambulance drivers who arrived on the scene thought we were done for. Things did not look good for us. But after a helicopter ride to the nearest trauma center 100 miles away, we are still alive and breathing today. I spent about 5 weeks in the hospital, but only remember the last 2. To remind me what happened, I have nasty scars on my lower lip and chin and a dent on the side of head. One thing I find myself wondering is if I had the chance to relive the whole thing over again, would I want to remember? At this point in my life I can say I would not. Such things are not worth remembering. And did we ever fly again? You bet. As soon as my mom was able to pass a flight physical, we were both up in the air again. Passing out saves you from most of the PTSD of trauma. Tiny miracles. So when I was a very young child, I lived in Southeast Asia. One day early in the morning I was just playing. My parents must have been doing their morning prayers, and the next thing I knew, the entirety of the ocean was spilling over itself. We lived on the coast at this time and it was like the whole ocean had just lifted out. My dad grabbed me and ran towards a block of apartments at the end of the street. I don't know what happened to my mum, but she must have been unable to run fast enough because I'm pretty sure she got overwhelmed by the tide and survived by holding onto a tree. I'm not entirely sure how she survived actually, because looking back on the extent of the 2004 tsunami, she should have been swept away completely by the force of the water. So now I'm on the top of this roof and my dad goes back in, swimming to our house to retrieve our passports and documents, while the water keeps creeping up. I think it was a 4 or 5 story building and the water must have reached the 2nd or 3rd floor. He must have been a really strong swimmer because he got pretty much all of our documents in between the waves, and probably saved my mum as well. After this we were able to stay with friends some distance away after this, but everything in the town got destroyed. In fact, I realized the reason why my parents don't bring up my childhood friends or try to keep in contact with their families is because they are dead. This is pretty much the only really vivid memory I have from that age, and my parents still kind of had a fear of the sea for a long time after that. They still can't handle videos of flooding. That's pretty intense. I've seen loads of stuff about that tsunami but never ever actually read anything from someone who was there. Glad you and your parents are okay. My plane landed in a field and flipped. Flying in a single engine Cessna 210, my family was on the final leg of a 2-week camping trip. My dad, piloting, had started the descent down when at 3,000 feet, our engine started rattling uncontrollably. 10-year-old me remembers seeing the oil temperature gauge in the red, but not understanding the significance. As the rattling got worse, my dad shut the engine off and radioed Mayday to the tower. But that's when I started to pray. We were only 5-ish miles from our final destination, but we had to make an emergency landing in a field. I remember staring out the window at the ground thinking about my cat, and my mom leaning back from the co-pilot seat to tell my brother and I to pull our legs up for the crash position. My dad exchanged a few other words with the controller and then shut the rest of the plane down. We hit the ground a little fast at 80 knots. Normal is 65-70 kts. Our front gear struck an irrigation pipe running across the field which caused it to shear off. Without a front gear, our nose hit the field and we went belly side up. When I came to, everything was eerily dark, and I was hanging upside down. My dad basically ripped the doors off the back of the plane to get my brother and I out. My family was shaken up, but okay. The farmer appeared minutes later, absolutely astonished. Then, 5 news helicopters starting circling. Traffic was backed up for miles around the field as people strained to get a look. Then the paramedics arrived. My mom likes to joke they were a bit disappointed to find victims of a plane crash to be standing around chatting. The worst injury of the lot was my cut lip, which I cut with my own teeth in the jolt of the crash. And my parents got some bruising from seatbelts a few days later. The farmer's wife gave my brother and I Cheez-Its and honey sticks and I can't eat them to this day. And the first thing I did when I got back home was hug my cat, as a 10-year-old does. As far as my individual story goes, I got my pilot's license 3 years ago at the age of 18. I'm now in school to become an aerospace engineer where I hope to one day design planes that save people like this one saved my life. It failed in the most elegant of ways, and my dad's quick thinking and training was able to see us to the ground alive. And for those wondering what happened to the plane, an unidentified object clogged the oil filter in the engine, leading to a piston overheating, snapping, and punching a hole in the side of the engine. And the first thing I did when I got back home was hug my cat, as a 10-year-old does. Exactly what I did when I got home after being hit by a car. He made a beeline for me and stuck to me like glue for the next week. He knew. I don't know how, but he knew. I'm late, but I hope some people can hear me out. I was in a plane crash when I was 9. It was a small plane, with only my dad and I being the only ones in the plane. The plane had 4 doors and a propeller. That kind of plane. We were about 1,000 feet over the San Francisco Bay, and the engine quit. The plane proceeded to fall, as would be the case. We approached the water, my 9-year-old brain coming to grips with the concept of death and such. We hit the water, and the plane skipped a few times, and water began to flood through the floor. My dad and I got out and sat on the wing of our sinking plane for about 30 minutes, and the plane was too sunk to stay sitting on, so we had no choice other than to swim towards shore. The shoreline was miles away at least, However, we had no other options. As we were swimming, mind you, the water was freezing in October, another recreational pilot in a helicopter flew overhead and attempted to drop us life jackets. One was horribly off the mark, but we were able to grab one. After swimming for half a mile in t-shirts and shorts, we came across a mud flat and dragged ourselves onto it. We were waiting there for a while, and a Department of Fish and Game boat trolled by, looking for illegal hunters. This led to our rescue. When I got home, I took the best shower of my life. Now, I'm 19 and still have a residual fear of flying, but I am okay with flying on my own and all that. What really left an impact on me is the experience of a worst case scenario, and how my mind will usually jump to that in most situations. This anxiety has led to me being incredibly jumpy and on edge constantly. PTSD can manifest itself in all walks of life, with even the littlest things resulting in my getting spooked. As a 9-year-old without any follow-up therapy, coming to terms with this on my own has really shaped my character. The cause of the crash? Condensation in the fuel bladders of the plane put water in the engine, killing it mid-flight. They didn't successfully recover the plane, but they managed to pull it up out of the water to see if they could determine a cause. The plane was far too damaged to be anything other than scrap at that point. On a positive note, this accident gave me a new perspective on life, and showed me that life can be taken away just as easily as it is given. Life each day like it could be your last. Whoa, that would be freaking terrifying. Thank you for sharing. When I was 19, my buddy and I went fishing at a pretty big lake up in Gainesville, Florida. I was sitting at the very front with the cooler to try to balance out the weight, and while we were crossing the middle of the lake in our Gino, we had a paddle strapped to the side and it caught the water while we were going about 20 miles per hour. It threw us probably 7-10 featuring and immediately started sinking. About 5 minutes before that happened, we decided to put both of our phones in a waterproof box, which ultimately saved us. BC, there was no one else out that day given it was a little chilly outside. So after we were in the water, the boat started sinking fast, but my friend and I stayed calm and started brainstorming on what we should do. First thing I did was swim down to the boat and by feel had to find the phones. Once that happened, we called the police, but their response time was awful. We were treading in water that was cold enough to give us hypothermia, with the box that had our phones in it over our heads for about 50 minuets until the dispatch lady said they were commandeering someone else's boat because theirs wasn't starting. Once we got out, the officers told us that they were expecting to find us dead either from getting stuck on the mushy bottom and drowning or by some of the big gatters, but luckily we didn't encounter any of them. After the ambulance took our temperature and we came back fine, they proceeded to make sure we were okay, then let us get on with our day. Life and death situations are no joke and they can happen at any time. Make sure you are prepared mentally and physically. Your life or your friends may depend on you and how you've trained. Swim down to the boat and by feel had to find the phones. Big gatters. Oh frick that. Back in 2008, I was in a hiking sightseeing tour with a well-known rugged travel outfitter. The tour started in New Delhi, India and ended in Kathmandu, Nepal. Halfway through the tour, we meander our way to Varanasi when there were rumors of strikes in Nepal, mainly Lumbini and the Chitwan National Park area. So instead of taking a bus to the border to get to the park in Nepal, we took a plane. A crisis averted, right? Landed in Kathmandu, and of course the baggage handlers decided to strike. Had to wait about 5 hours to get our bags. We stayed about a day at Kathmandu and about the strike ended, we ended up proceeding with our trip to the Chitwan National Park and staying at a homestay for a few days. After a few days of getting our fill of elephant riding, hippo watching and tiger tracking, there were rumors going around in the village about a huge strike next day with travel on the roads potentially barred with the threat of death. We all decided to head out extremely early so we would not be stuck in Chitwan for potentially days. So around 3 AM, me and 11 other members of the group and our guide and driver head out into the dark and onto Kathmandu. It was quiet for about the 15-20 minutes of driving in the dark. Lots of meandering turns around small villages and lakes. However, that was stopped short. We saw a small minibus torched, fires burning wildly, and soon we were stopped by these masked villagers holding sticks. One of them came to the driver's side and pulled the driver out, proceeded to repeatedly smack him on his face over and over. Another masked man tried to open our passenger door. Luckily it could only be opened by one side, and luckily it was held tightly closed by a burly Australian member of our group. While this was going on, another masked man broke our back window. This resulted in a few of us crying in fear. Me, my cousin and a few other guys were thinking of breaking out of the car and tackling these masked men with skirts, long eyes. We figured the combined arms of a few Americans, Aussies and a German can take them down right. No sooner than we thought of that plan, motorcycles started roaring in close by, carrying Molotov cocktails. Crap, our guide and the driver started pleading with them, saying we are tourists, there are women in here and that we will go back in peace, just let us go. They eventually let us go, told us to turn around and don't come out until the strike is over. To this day, every time I hear glass break, I cringe and remember these events clearly. Holy frick, horrifying. My husband's parents lived on a boat off the coast of Asia for a while about 20 something years ago. Well, when my mother-in-law was about 8 months pregnant with my brother-in-law, the boat sank in the middle of the ocean. It happened slowly, over the course of a day or so the couple sent out a bunch of distress calls, packed the important things, and camped out in the lifeboat while the ship sank. They saved a few nice things for their eventual rescuers, a nice canned ham and a good bottle of wine. Well, they were eventually picked up by the Exxon Valdez, which was fortunate. Unfortunately, at the time the crew was entirely Muslim, and as such the canned ham and nice wine weren't ideal gifts. Your in-laws sound sweet even when facing trouble. Probably a bit too late to the party, but when I was 10 my house kinda blew up. When I was 10 years old, less than 10 days before Christmas time, there was a gas leak at my house. We had no idea it was leaking, but it had been building up behind our wall near the gas fireplace for a while. In the morning I was getting ready to go to school. My mom was almost ready to go to work, and I was tying my shoes to head out the door. My mom comes out of the bathroom and is putting on her earrings, grabbing her cell phone, etc., and is heading toward the door. She tells me to unplug the Christmas tree lights. We love decorating. When I did, the spark from unplugging them ignited the box around the socket, and then the pocket of gas behind the wall. It all blew up. The fireplace was pushed out of the wall in one whole piece. The wall was destroyed. The mantle over the fireplace flew clear across the room. The nutcrackers we left on the fireplace flew across the room and 2 got embedded in the wall. The Christmas tree, luckily a fake plastic one, was knocked over. The side facing the wall was curled, melted, and burned. Almost every ornament made of breakable stuff was shattered, rather from the boom or the fall. Hard to tell. The shockwave traveled through the house, down the hallway into my mom's room and blew out the sliding glass door, and blew it into the pool in pieces the size of pennies or smaller. All throughout the house were stress cracks in the sheetrock, cracks in windows, various things. We were lucky. I got minor burns on my face. I was just off to the side of said blown up wall. My mom was sitting on a chair near the door, far away from it all. Had she sat on the couch to put on her shoes, as she does sometimes, she may have been severely injured or worse. There was no real fire. It was more of a blast of really hot air, really fast. The fireman chief called it a flash fire. There was no fire because there was nothing close enough to the hottest part that could ignite. Good thing we got a fake reusable tree that year to save money. If we had not, it definitely would have blown up. Not necessarily a plane crash, but I was on a plane that had to do a belly landing. I was around 8 or so and was flying solo. There was someone from the crew with me at all times and they were great. We were coming into our approach when the smell of burning rubber flooded the plane. Then a thick black smoke. The strange thing is I don't remember people panicking. I only remember the pilot coming on and saying that one of the wheels wasn't lowering. We didn't have enough fuel to circle any longer. I guess we had been circling for a while. And then something to the likes of, "We will proceed with an emergency landing and will be on the ground shortly and safely." Then we landed. I don't remember it being rough or out of control. We just landed, but it was loud. Then we got to jump down the slide, which was awesome. I really like how you say the most awesome thing is jumping down the slide, instead how you didn't die. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.